Welcome to Resilience Unravelled. Hi everybody and welcome to Resilience Unravelled, a podcast that examines all aspects of personal and organisational resilience. A huge all-encompassing subject that covers the ability to thrive in life by harnessing your cognitive, emotional, physiological and contextual abilities. I share stories from people who have thrived despite remarkable obstacles, as well as highly successful practitioners and experts across a range of topics. And this podcast introduces their amazing stories and expertise, as well as my own reflections, perspectives, strategies and tips, which come from my own synthesis of themes and trends from wider learning. You can go to qedod.com/extras to access offers, tools and resources, including free articles and ebooks. For those of you that would be interested in supporting our work and contributing more proactively, you can find our new Patreon page at patreon.com. Then search for Resilience Space Unravelled. So, let's get started. Enjoy the show. So hi and welcome back to Resilience Unravelled. Today, a very interesting episode because someone who does pretty well what I do, but from a different perspective, in a different world, in a different time zone, and with a different accent. Today, our guest is Eileen McDargh. And before this podcast started, I had to have lessons on how to say that name. So how did I do, Eileen?
You did great. You did great.
I like to start with a little bit of showing off and self-esteem stroking. So Eileen, I can tell immediately by that accent of yours that you're across the pond. Tell me where you are.
I am sitting in Southern California. And believe it or not, I don't have sun. It is what we call June glooms. Wow. So it was actually misty rain this morning when I went for my 5-mile run.
Can you see the sunshine behind me? Look at this.
Yes, I can.
This is the
I know.
day.
Make me. There's no such thing as climate change, is there?
Apparently not. So Eileen, tell us a little bit. Describe what it is you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, actually, people call me a hope merchant. And basically what it is that I am a hope merchant who uses words, both the written and the spoken word. I have had my own consulting practice. I can't believe it, but I am really going to say this for 40 years, which is incredible because I'm only 21. I don't know how that happened.
I can tell that.
And my field has always been in the field of communication. And so I look at how do leaders communicate with their staff, their stakeholders. But over time, I become more and more intrigued in this notion of resiliency. And my audiences will range everything from global pharmaceuticals to the U.S. Armed Forces to hospital administrators to school districts. So they're all across the board because at the end of the day, communication is the thing that binds us together. But the deal with resiliency for me, Russell, was really when 9/11 hit the U.S.
Yeah.
And I began to wonder, how is it that you survived something that is, for us, was the biggest thing that we had experienced in modern time. And from that, I began to look at what is it that allows people to be resilient. And also at that time, I ended up taking care of my mother for the last 6 years of her life, which taught me a whole lot about not only what I needed to do in order to care for her, but also how to care for my family. And one of the things I finally came down to the realization, and people kept telling me this and I didn't believe it until I finally had to say, you're right, that at the end of the day, resilience, whether you're talking about resilient relationships or resilient organization, your own personal resiliency is all about energy management.
Great.
How do I have the mental, emotional, physical energy to keep on keeping on?
So that's interesting. Let me just leap in if I may.
No, please.
Because a lot of people will be listening us talking about resilience as we describe it, resiliency, and we need to unpack a little bit about what it is. So not how do you define it, but what do you think resilience is all about? I mean, you were getting to it around energy, but if you explore that a bit more for me, please.
Okay, and this one's going to push against you, Russell, because what I say is resiliency is not what it says in the dictionary. Because what in the dictionary, it implies that, and I'll paraphrase Webster, is that an object under compressive stress, when the stress is up, the object returns to its original position. In other words, it, quote, bounces back to where it is. Well, that's fine if you're a tree or you're a piece of steel. But I do not believe human beings go back. There's no such thing as back. We are forever changed with every incident, with every event that happens in our life. So to me, what resiliency is the ability to grow through challenge or opportunity so that you end up better, wiser, smarter, kinder, whatever on the other side. So it's all about growth. So if there's no growth, we really haven't done this whole resiliency thing. It also, one of the other things the dictionary says is that it uses the word quickly, to quickly recover. Well, depending on what the event is, there's no quickly. Then also notice that I say it's challenge or opportunity. If you're presented with a great opportunity, Russell, it's going to require a lot of resiliency, a lot of energy on your part to take advantage of what that opportunity is that has been given to you.
So that's interesting because actually I would suggest we were violently agreeing, if more than anything else, because actually the phrase bouncing back, I think is not, it's actually something we've left behind. If you have to say anything, it's bouncing forward in a funny sort of sense, because and actually when I talk to leaders, I actually say you should be able to count the amount of learning that's taken place every month in your team because of resilience, because without the ability to take risks and fall apart or make mistakes, you will never learn. And so that is the point, isn't it? We should be encouraging building resilience. It's a skill set. It's something that allows you to work.
That's good. What you just said is a skill set. Yeah. Because I believe resiliency is a life skill. Yeah, exactly. It's not oh crap, everything fell apart, now I need to become resilient. Yeah. It's in fact, one of the verbs I use with it is cultivate. Yeah. And if you think about when you cultivate a field, you have to dig up the soil, you got rid of all the clods and stuff, you got to plant the seed, you got to water, you got to weed. And so cultivating resiliency is, it's like cultivating a garden. Yeah. And so it's over time. And sometimes it takes a long time before it blossoms, and then you have to keep coming back. So it really is never ending. Yes.
And that's a good thing, because actually that's you can actually say over my right shoulder, our model of resilience, and you'll see in the middle is the word potential. Because actually, all of resilience, all of life, all of humans' progress is about potential, isn't it? Really, and the extent to which we liberate or restrict our own potential.
It's so here you are sitting in. You're close to Southampton, right?
That's right.
That's where yeah. Well, I've just discovered this, and I am going to write about this and probably speak about it, because I think it is pertinent for what's happening to us today in this world. In 1850, there was this massive storm that swept across England. Just took down 5 ships and all of the men aboard, gone. Another ship that was headed to Ireland went down, gone. And when the storm finally passed, on Orkney Island, there off the coast of Scotland, when the villagers went out, the combination of this massive storm and the winds and the rain and the tide and the waves, lo and behold, at this place called Thackeray, it had ripped off the whole topsoil. And what the villagers looked down and to discover was an entire village, a village that was older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, the Neolithic village. And it has occurred to me that what's happening right now for us, everything from here in the United States, there's horrible social unrest, the global pandemic, the COVID-19, severe economic downturns, that what we have done finally is the topsoil has been ripped away. And we're now looking at, oh my gosh, what have we buried? What have we kicked down? What have we not looked at? We buried it because, it's the way we've always done things. That's what organizations do. You just keep piling more and more and more on top. So now what we have is an opportunity to be resilient, to begin to say, how do we create the world that we want, the business that we want, the nation that we want, the community that we want. And I find this actually very positive if, in fact, individuals and leaders will begin to see, how do we now become adaptable, which is what you use the word innovative. How do we think about these things differently now that the topsoil is off?
And that's the key, isn't it? Because it's very easy to go, well, it's actually almost human nature to go back to what we always did and call it the new thing. And for me, the idea of imagination, ingenuity, and innovation is the key, because unless you do that bit, you really just end up with the same old, because the culture is always stronger than the change. And actually what we're seeing in America with Black Lives Matter and transgender world, some of the rise of the millennials, what we're seeing is seismic changes, the way that society is changing. And I always find it interesting to see that it's often our generation that's holding the culture still, because of course we have the most to gain from it. We have the white privilege. And actually, it's actually hardest for us to be able to see it, because, of course, we've been part of it and benefited from it all for our lives. So this idea of being imaginative is, it's allowing cultures to break, which is key. But and the risk at the moment is that culture could break into quite a catastrophic way at the moment because of I think some quite malign forces at the world. So resilience for me is about how you reform and regroup and innovate and move forward, rather than being hijacked, because it's a slightly vulnerable phase, isn't it?
That's an interesting term, hijacked, which means when you think about it, if a plane is hijacked, it's an act of terrorism. It's taking you someplace you didn't want to go. I find that an interesting word, because in some ways, take out the violence, take out that to recreate, to be resilient now, it is going to mean going someplace where you didn't think you were going to go.
Yeah.
And what it's going to take, Russell, is courageous leadership.
Yeah. Well, so we're all screwed then, aren't we?
Well, and we don't have courageous leadership, because in order to have courageous leadership, you have to have courageous cultures. Yeah. And courageous cultures is that people are encouraged to speak out. They are, and you listen, which means leaders quote, and I'll put it in quote, because we have a lot of people that call themselves leaders. They're not. Yeah. They're not leaders at all. It means that you want to encourage the people who are the micro innovators, the people who are the customer advocates, and then the people who are the problem solvers. And they're going to tell you things, what you thought you were doing over here, I think that's a better way to do that. So the Courageous Conversations, which, by the way, is a great new book coming out by Karen Hurt, H-U-R-T, and David Dye, D-Y-E. It's wonderful. It's going to require humility, transparency, and the energy of connection, which means I'm willing to sit and listen. And then how do we begin to create, what are the values, and how do we move, and in small ways too. I don't see this as being this tidal wave, because that ends up, it's going all the way from one end to the other. How do we begin to take one step at a time and create what we want that is new?
Yes. And I think actually it's interesting. I'm also interested in this idea of it's a sort of trend I hear rolling out of the States: radical candor, courageous conversations and such like. And I think we've lost the art of just having conversations where we're not worried about hurting people's feelings, because what we've forgotten how to do is actually have a conversation where we are not taking responsibility for other people's feelings all the time, instead of training and developing people to understand how to manage themselves in a way that they can have these conversations. So for me, these are just conversations. These are not courageous. If you're at work, or if you're in any form of commerce, you have to be able to tell people what they need to hear, whether they want to or not. And I think this is one of the challenges. We've got out of this habit. We've got out of this habit of leaders being able to say what needs to be said because of a slightly benign parental approach, which is actually why we have the approach of a lot of millennials, I can't say that word, youngsters, not being able to actually handle feedback, because we've disempowered people to have feedback, because we've disempowered from the idea that feedback generates learning, and learning is potential. Here we are back at the beginning again. But the more we turn feedback into an event, a special thing, rather than just something that's a natural part of the day-to-day progress of the world, I think that's a bit of a challenge, really.
I think it goes both ways, because I've seen too many organizations in which because feedback goes both ways. It's not only what, these are the things I need you to do, but the person says, these are the things I need you to hear.
Yeah.
People are stifled. Why should I give any ideas? It never goes anywhere anyway. Nobody ever listens to what I'm going to say. Or they're really, shut down, where they might have something really to offer. And so instead of creating a courageous culture, people are just, hey, don't get me. Nope. I remember going into, it was a big steel plant. And I had on the hard hat, and I'm climbing up where they're doing all the, they're melting the ore or whatever it is. And there was this big guy sitting up there with all the bells and whistles or whatever he was doing. And he said, I'm going to leave here in about 3 weeks. I'm retiring. And he pointed over to what was the office where the senior people were. And he said, you know what? No one over there has ever come in and asked me what I think we could do to make this better. He said, they don't want to know what I know. Yeah. So when I retire in 3 weeks, it's going with me.
Yeah, good for him.
I found that tremendously sad.
But all too regular, because the problem is leadership. And like I said earlier, if we're relying on the majority of leaders, we've got a real problem, because actually most people are not developed in a way that allows them to think about, getting around these ideas of knowledge and such like. I mean, that's just crass ignorance for any leader not to actually talk to their people, isn't it? One that you would think wouldn't be the case these days, but it is all too common.
Yeah. Well, I think also, I also believe that each one of us is a leader. You don't need a title. Yeah, and I think you're there. So we all have a sphere of influence.
Yeah.
And so in this crazy soil ripped off, looking down at, oh my gosh, what do we have here? Where is it that I personally, to be resilient, where is it that I can create the kind of connections that will give me the energy to begin to make or see what kind of changes have to happen? Because I think there are 4 resiliency skills. The first one is adaptability. Mm-hmm. And adaptability is the ability to find multiple ways of responding to any given situation. And we get stuck. We don't do that because we get stuck in negativity. We get stuck in pessimism. We get stuck in, oh my gosh, what'll happen if? So we don't do those things, or we don't take it in. So adaptability is one. Agility, to me, is speed coupled with wisdom. So it's one thing to think and feel. It's another thing to do. So how do I put some things in motion? And then the other 2 skills, the third one is laughability. I think laughter is a huge resiliency skill.
Yeah.
It just puts things in perspective.
Yes. Well, that really is a separate life skill, isn't it? That we've all forgotten to a certain extent, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look at some of the crazy things that are being posted on the internet with all the stuff that's going on, and I think they're put there to make you laugh, because you need something to break this intensity. Yeah. And then the last one is alignment. Yeah. And alignment to me is that you are lined up with a purpose that is bigger than you.
Yes.
And it's the Viktor Frankl, that man or woman can survive any what if you have a why.
Yes. And
I think that's another thing that we also seek that can allow us to grow through is what's this bigger reason? And I think no one is here by accident. No one.
Well, the good thing is that, and I think the point about resiliency is that you and I think, could have a quite interesting disagreement about many of the things we've talked about today, but we wouldn't fall out at the end of it, nor would we take a position that said that we wouldn't actually listen to each other, nor would we do that thing where we go away and actually ponder on what we've heard. and think to yourself, well, I wonder, and that's interesting, I wonder, and maybe I should find out more. And I think we've lost this, and I don't think that's a courageous conversation for me. This is a normal conversation where two people who can have a view on something backed up by evidence or whatever it might be can come together and actually have these conversations. I think we've forgotten these sorts of conversations. I remember years ago I was working in a media organization, and it was at the point where newspapers were still produced, and and there was a journalist deciding whether to use one word or another, and the head of editorial and the head of distribution were literally up front of each other, nose to nose, screaming at each other, and then the decision was made, the button was pressed, the presses rolled, and they both walked away. And I looked at them saying, you two must be about to kill each other. And they're both completely calm and said, no, it's just a difference of opinion. We just express it very, very, very in a very lively way. But there was no emotional content.
Right.
And that's the difference, isn't it? We seem to have forgotten that it's possible to have disagreement without it getting bent out of shape or turning it into a fight.
That's right. How to disagree without being disagreeable.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it. So, from where I am sitting right now, your listeners don't know that behind you is looks like a flip chart or something that's got a star in the middle, and I see different colors, but I cannot see the words that are on it.
That's all resilience.
So I am sure.
But we're here to talk about yours.
No, but I want to know, because see, to me, I can always learn. Just because I come with one way of looking at it doesn't mean there aren't more valuable or something that could expand what it is that I know.
You're very generous, but everyone's heard my opinions on resilience a lot. So you and I can talk about that later. But what we're going to do is talk a little bit about you, because that's much more important at the moment. So I'm fascinated by your ideas, and I know, like myself, you're very interested in the whole idea of burnout as well. So do you want to? I have some very clear ideas about burnout, so I'd be fascinated to hear yours.
But I'd like to hear yours.
Well, you're going first because you're the guest.
Oh, okay. Does that mean I don't have to do the dishes?
Oh, you mentioned it.
All right. Well, I have a book coming out August 4th called Burnout to Breakthrough: Building Resilience to Refuel, Recharge, and Reclaim What Matters. And this book came about because in this overarching, people hiring me, organizations bringing me in to speak on resilience, for the last 2.5, I'd say 3 years, almost inevitably, Russell, it had been in the context of burnout. When you have 5,000 pharmacists give you a standing ovation because you talked about using resilience to overcome burnout, and they're standing, it wasn't about me. It was about the fact that they needed to figure out, we are feeling so fried. Yeah. And because of that, I decided, okay, I need to write this book. And it's no small coincidence that in May of this past year, not this year, 2019, that the World Health Organization, listed burnout in its classification as an occupational hazard. Yeah. And so what I decided is I needed to look at, and I did, there are 5 different case studies that are in there that I trace through what seems to be a process for how do I begin to build resilience in order to refuel. And what's interesting, Russell, is that I had to turn the manuscript into the publisher in December. Then we hit February and March.
Yes, sounds familiar.
And now it's even worse. Yeah. And what makes it worse, what I'm seeing in the research that's coming across my desk, is that the people who thought, okay, just give me one day at home, let me work from house one day. Now the burning out is because I cannot go into an office, because now I am juggling. I have a 3-year-old and I'm trying to do homeschooling with the 10-year-old, and I don't get to talk to my colleagues the way I did, because sometimes burnout isn't so much the work that we're doing, quote, for salary, that work was the place of release because what was difficult was at home.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think the World Health Organization actually only scratched the surface, that we have to look at all of the ways in which, as Freudenberger said back in the 70s, that it is a feeling of exhaustion absolute exhaustion due to trying to achieve some unrealistic expectation imposed upon by yourself or society. The expectation is, I have to work this way.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because whilst you have that going on, you've got a load of people who, of course, are pontificating on Facebook and social media about how brilliant they're doing at the moment, how they're homeschooling their 10-year-old and they're doing macrame puzzles and they're doing this and they're creating this fantastic life. And you can look at when you get to that narrow stage of burnout, you lose, you get into that sort of tunnel mode. You sort of lose this perspective that most of those people are actually going through the same thing, but just lying to themselves about where they really are. And I think there's it's a really difficult problem at the moment, because and I totally agree with you on this, people can be burned out wherever they are. And whilst I admire the WHO for actually coming out and saying it was a work-based stuff, I mean, how much burnout comes from homes, and it's not just this idea of being frazzled to death, it's rusting to death, isn't it? This idea of being so underutilized as well, so terminally bored by what you're doing. You can actually
that's a great point.
Yeah, you can feel your brains literally liquefying and dripping out of your ears.
That's a great point.
That's burnout as well.
Yeah. I wrote my first book in 1984. The title was Work for a Living and Still Be Free to Live.
Yeah.
And as far as we can figure, it was the first book that ever looked at this notion of, quote, balance, and I'm putting it in quotes because you and I both know there is no such thing, and authentic work that fed your spirit. Yeah. And now here we come, 1984. My goodness, now here we are in 2020, and it's like it hasn't shifted. It hasn't shifted. So I can be burned out being totally, absolutely bored, stupid. Yeah. Because I'm going through the motions. And so what we're missing is this idea of the why. What is it that would feed my spirit? So really smart people in talent management are saying, not, what are you good at, but what is it that you would really love to do? Yeah. And how can we find a place for you in the organization to do that which intrigues you, that which excites you? So, for example, I'm very good at writing press releases. But in one of my jobs, and actually it was the one that preceded starting my own organization, I thought, if I write another press release, I'm going to throw up. I can't stand this. I hate it. And I don't care about these clients because they're missing the boat. It's not about whose face is on the cover of a magazine, is that you're missing the relationships with each other inside and your customers. And so I was burning out doing that.
Yeah. Supposedly something you loved. And the thing is,
it was something I was good at.
Yeah.
See, that's it. We look at, what are you good at?
Yeah. Just
because I'm good at it doesn't mean it's the thing that feeds me.
And that's the thing, isn't it? You get this thing in work creation. And people forget burnout is, if we're thinking about the organizational thing, it's a problem for the organization, not the individual. And you often say to people, what are you good at and what do you like doing? That doesn't actually mean that's what the organization needs either. And sometimes we forget that. That's what development's for. Sometimes it's the job of a leader to spot something in people around them that says, this is an opportunity for you to really do something different. And
sometimes, Russell, it's up to it's up to the individual to say, maybe where I am in this quote, and I'll put it in, there's no such thing as 9 to 5. Nobody works 9 to 5 anymore at all. But that, how else can I bring something else so this feeds my family, but I've got this thing over here. And I saw a wonderful example of this last May. I was in a major cancer hospital here in the States, and there was a children's wing to the hospital. And on the window of the children's wing was painted this very fanciful elephant.
Oh, great.
And I found out that one of the housekeepers loved to paint. And so what she did, she had their permission, when she had free time, a break, she would paint the windows of the children's wings with the elephant. Yeah. And when a housekeeper now, she's a housekeeper, or they call them environmental services. So when she would go into a patient's room, sometimes she would have made drawn a little card and left it for them with a note.
Yeah.
She took the quote job of housekeeper and said, how do I transform this into something that allows me to bring another part of me here?
Yeah. And I think we disenfranchise ourselves by taking accountability away. Because actually, if I'm going to be a housekeeper, or I'm going to do anything, or a podcast guest, or whatever it is, it's part of our accountability to say, well, actually, why don't I turn that into something for myself? Because we can spend, 8 and 10 hours a day being miserable, or we can, have some sort of productive input into that. And that's our choice, really,
Right.
And I think people spend too much time in the victim state going, well, actually, you're not allowing me to do this, and you're not doing this, and you're not doing that. And you forget, actually, you're part of the equation.
Right. Well, when you said that, what's that old classic story about the two bricklayers? One of them saying, "What are you doing?" "I'm laying bricks," and the other one said, "I'm building a cathedral."
That's right.
It's same activity, but
I'm glad you said that, because normally it's I'm flying someone to the moon, so I'm pleased about that. It's nice to have a new one. You and I could chat for hours, and perhaps one day we will. But sadly, I have to be very respectful of your time. How do people find out more about you, Eileen? Tell us your sort of connection.
Well, thank you for asking. Obviously, hopefully they will see my name on the podcast. Yeah. So you can just go to www.eileenmcdargh and you will find me. You can go on Amazon.com, put in my name, and you will see all the different books that I have. You can also pre-order the Burnout to Breakthrough. It comes out August 4th.
Yeah, I'll be buying it.
That's probably the best way. I'm on LinkedIn. My Twitter handle is MacDarling, MacDarling, MacDarling. So you can find me, talk to me. You can email me, Eileen at eileenmcdargh.com. I do respond to emails because conversation is important.
Great. It's been a joy to have you here today, and I really enjoyed it. And you're doing that symbol. I don't know how you do that. It's one of those, isn't it? I always get this mixed up.
Do this. Look, what those of you who are on the podcast can't see, I made a little heart with my fingers, and I'm just holding it up to say I love to do this. Yeah. Poor old Russell can't get his fingers to do it, but I know he wanted to.
It's arthritis. So let's just say it's that. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. You take care. Hi, everybody. I hope you found that episode useful and interesting. Feedback is always welcomed, and if you're in the mood to subscribe to us or even leave a comment on iTunes or Stitcher, that would be amazing. If you want to suggest ideas or even people you would like me to interview, then reach out to us at qedod.com/contact. As I said earlier, you can go to qedod.com/podcasts for show notes or follow the links. And you can go to qedod.com/extras to access offers, tools and resources, including free articles and ebooks. For those of you that would be interested in supporting our work and contributing more proactively, you can find our new Patreon page at patreon.com. Then search for Resilience Unraveled. I look forward to being in your ear next time around. Take care.